This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Monday, June 16th, 2025. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
Politically motivated murders in Minnesota.
Knew practically every person in her district.
I'm Clayton Neville.
Israel and Iran trade missile strikes as Israel seeks to destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. But what role will the U.S. play? I'm John Stolnis in Washington.
The Trump administration directing ICE to pause arrests at farms, restaurants, and hotels. I'm Julie Walker.
On Wall Street, markets open today with investors watching Middle East unrest and spiking oil prices. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
A South Carolina man was put to death by lethal injection. He'd been sent to death row twice for separate murders. I'm Haya Panjwani.
Cyber attack targeting emails of reporters working for the Washington Post. We'll have the latest. All ahead on America in the Morning. The man suspected of the targeted shooting of two Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses is in custody near his home after a massive 24-hour manhunt. Correspondent Clayton Neville has details about the suspect, who police called the face of evil, and about the victims of his rampage.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called the killings of State Rep Melissa Hortman and her husband politically motivated. He said the same of the attack on Senator John Hoffman and his wife the same night by the same suspect. Hoffman and his wife injured in that shooting. Representative Hortman was emotional when speaking to reporters ahead of her murder as the lone Democrat who voted for a measure to deny health care for illegal immigrants.
I know that people will be hurt by that vote, and we worked very hard to try to get a budget deal.
57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter is the suspect. He's said to have been wearing police gear when he arrived at the homes of the lawmakers. He escaped police after being confronted and left with a hit list of dozens of other lawmakers on it behind. Much of the focus now, though, the lives lost.
She was a true leader and loved her work, but was always so grounded.
Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota spoke with ABC's This Week about her friend, Melissa Hortman.
Melissa Hortman was a woman that I wish everyone around the country knew. When you think about a true public servant who goes into it for the right reasons, it's Melissa. And I saw how she door-knocked and knew practically every person in her district.
Senator Mark Kelly and his wife, Gabby Gifford, who was shot years ago, made a social media post.
Two state legislators in Minnesota have been targeted and shot in their homes.
So sad, so sad.
So Representative Melissa Hortman was killed along with her husband, Mark. And we're thinking of them and their family today, especially their two kids.
A stack of No Kings flyers was found inside the vehicle linked to Bolter. The flyers referenced the anti-Trump protest planned and held over the weekend. After the shooting, though, No Kings events were canceled across Minnesota. Bolter claimed to run a security company, but his roommate told reporters over the weekend that he was never able to get that company off the ground. A specific motive still under investigation. I'm Clayton Neville.
The weekend saw a number of missile strikes, first by Israel against sites in Iran suspected of housing their nuclear program, followed by Iranian retaliatory attacks inside Israel. President Trump has now opened the door to a possible U.S. military response. John Stolnis is following details from Washington.
Air raid sirens wailing across the skies of Tel Aviv Sunday as both countries traded volleys throughout the weekend. Iran's health ministry tells the Associated Press more than 220 people have been killed since Israel began targeting Iran's nuclear sites in an attempt to prevent them from continuing with their enrichment program. Some human rights groups say the number is higher. At least 14 people in Israel have died. Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Yakil Leiter, says his country is doing what's needed.
We pray for a speedy recovery of the almost 300 people who have been injured by the ballistic missile attacks fired by the Iranian regime into our population centers. War is difficult, but war is necessary and honorable when done with the purpose of preventing a larger war and saving lives.
Prior to leaving for this week's G7 summit in Canada, President Trump told reporters at the White House he's not concerned that the hostilities will be prolonged.
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But Sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
The president reiterated the U.S. is not involved with the Israeli military operation, but told ABC News' Rachel Scott, quote, "It's possible we could get involved." The Associated Press reports President Trump vetoed a plan for Israel to kill Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Trump also said Russian President Vladimir Putin has offered to act as a mediator between Israel and Iran. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham told CBS's Face the Nation, if it comes to it, the U.S. must do what's necessary to assist Israel in eliminating Iran's nuclear weapons program.
If diplomacy fails, Mr. President Trump, you've been great. Help Israel finish the job. Give them bombs, fly with them if necessary.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says G7 nations will work this week to try and de-escalate the situation. They have issued a travel warning to their citizens not to travel to Israel at this time. Iranian President Mahmoud Pezeshkian says he believes the U.S. is helping Israel and that if Israel continues to attack, Iran's response, quote, will be more decisive and severe. John Stolnis, Washington.
The top stories of the day are sponsored by Sleep Number. Smarter sleep is life-changing. Save over $600 on a Sleep Number King P5 smart bed, the lowest price of the season, only at a Sleep Number store. An update on immigration enforcement when America in the Morning continues after these messages. America in the Morning, Monday forecast. AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Storms have continued to develop over many plain states from eastern Montana into the Dakotas and then southward through eastern New Mexico into Texas. Today, the focus for these heavier storms will be across the northern plains as the storm system moves out of the northern Rockies and continues eastward. This will start with some heavier thunderstorms through North and South Dakota to start the day and then continue into Minnesota and western Wisconsin by this afternoon. This could produce localized flooding as well as hail, damaging winds, and even a tornado. And this will continue into more of Wisconsin southward to Iowa tonight. Then we'll have another round of storms developing in eastern Wyoming and then continue into Nebraska late today into tonight before shifting into northern Kansas late tonight. There will be some heavier thunderstorms across portions of southeast Missouri into western Tennessee and Kentucky, as well as eastern Arkansas and northern Mississippi, with additional showers and thunderstorms forming through a good portion of the southeast and mid-Atlantic from Florida northward to Virginia and as far west as eastern Texas. Some of these storms could provide some heavier rain. A little farther north from Maryland into southeast New York, it'll be fairly cloudy and cool today with occasional rain and drizzle. Highs will hold in the 60s for many areas. And then for the rest of the New York area into New England and extending into the eastern Great Lakes, it will be brighter and warmer with highs in the 70s and 80s. Where the heat will really turn up is in the southwest into Southern California, Utah, and Colorado, where portions of the area will be in the 90s and 100s with many 110-degree readings. That's the weather across America. Phoenix, Arizona will be one of the places with blazing sunshine today and a high near the record of 115. Cloudy and cool in Allentown, Pennsylvania with some drizzle and a high of 65. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. President Trump is curbing immigration enforcement at farms, meatpacking plants, hotels, and restaurants, with concerns those industries may suffer. A closer look now with Correspondent Julie Walker.
The Trump administration directing ICE to pause arrests at farms, restaurants, and hotels. A U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity, confirming to the Associated Press. This comes after President Trump took to social media to express alarm about the impact of aggressive immigration enforcement on those industries. The move also follows protests and an increase in enforcement. The Trump administration had said ICE would target 3,000 arrests a day. The shift suggests Trump's promise of mass deportations has its limits if it threatens industries like farms, restaurants, and hotels that rely on workers in the country illegally. I'm Julie Walker.
A number of reporters for the Washington Post appear to have been the victims of a cyber attack. The Wall Street Journal is reporting the attack compromised the email accounts of several journalists and was potentially the work of a foreign government, and that Washington Post executive editor Matt Murray notified staff via email regarding what he called a targeted, unauthorized intrusion into their email system. Staffers were told the intrusions compromised journalists' Microsoft accounts. The reporters targeted include those on the national security and economic policy teams, including some who write about China. Defense stocks are winning on Wall Street. That's part of business news when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Welcome back. You're with America in the Morning. The Business Report is brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments takes a disciplined approach with investing, helping clients navigate volatile markets. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. A check on how we'll see markets open this Monday. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger.
Wall Street opens this morning after a losing week for stocks last week amid that backdrop of Middle East unrest. U.S. oil prices spiked on Friday to their highest since January, and on Friday, that Dow sold off 760 points. You may soon see higher prices at the pump.
The easy answer on the gasoline side is the oil price goes up, gasoline price goes up. So we're going to see a little bump associated with this rally in crude.
That's Pickering Energy's Dan Pickering on CNBC. Defense stocks were one industry where prices were higher on Friday.
We've seen global defense spending at historic levels. So, the Trump administration has talked about a $1 trillion defense budget. And U.S. defense companies do a very robust business selling to U.S. allies and partners globally. Of course, there's been some uncertainty about whether those allies and partners, given the trade policies of the Trump administration, will continue to buy from America. But when you look at the numbers that I track, U.S. sales of weapons to foreign partners, we are on pace for a third record year.
TD Cowen's Roman Schweitzer on CNBC. Consumers are feeling better. Consumer sentiment rose for the first time this year in the latest survey as Americans get used to the Trump tariff shock. But some say that shock hasn't gotten here yet.
We haven't really seen the impact of tariffs in the data. Some of our checks indicate the companies are just starting to put price increases through in June and July. And some of the data in the reports this week, whether it's used car prices or airline fares, we think are transitory. We think we're going to have a reacceleration in inflation in the second half of the year. And that doesn't even assume that oil prices go higher from here.
Wolf Research's Chris Senick on CNBC. The battle over the late Jimmy Buffett's $275 million estate highlights the risks of family trusts for the wealthy. A court battle is brewing. Buffett left his estate through a trust to his widow and a trusted business partner. But she says he's mismanaging the assets, and he says she's interfering in business decisions. You can read the full story at CNBC.com. On this week's watch list, the Fed holds a meeting on interest rates. It's widely expected to leave them right where they are. We get fresh retail sales numbers to see how the consumer's holding up with their spending. Markets will be closed this Thursday for the Juneteenth holiday. As for today, investors are waiting for earnings from home builder Lennar. And the Paris Air Show is on while Boeing is handling a crash in India, the Air India Boeing 787, the first crash of that model of airplane. Normally, lots of deals in aviation would come out of that Paris Air Show today.
CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. Visas canceled, departure demanded. When America in the Morning continues after these messages. To South Carolina now, where the 6th death row inmate in 9 months has been executed. Correspondent Haya Panjwani reports.
A South Carolina man was put to death by lethal injection Friday night. He'd been sent to death row twice for separate murders. 57-year-old Steven Stanko was pronounced dead at 6:34 p.m. Friday. His first murder conviction was for shooting a friend and then cleaning out his bank account. His second was on the same night for killing his live-in girlfriend in her Georgetown County home, strangling her as he raped her teenage daughter. Stanko slit the teen's throat, but she survived.
I mean, he was laying there. There was no real straining. All you saw was just some, like his lips were moving like that. That was the closest to anything that looked like a strain or any kind of anything else going on.
AP correspondent Jeffrey Collins attended the execution.
Steven Stanko apologized to his victims, but he also asked not to be judged by what he called the worst day of his life.
Stanko is the 6th inmate executed in South Carolina in 9 months. That's after the state went 13 years without putting an inmate to death because it couldn't obtain lethal injection drugs. I'm Haya Panjwani.
Leave immediately. That's the message from U.S. officials. Lisa Dwyer reports that immigrants from several countries whose temporary status has been canceled should now voluntarily vacate the United States.
The Department of Homeland Security is notifying hundreds of thousands of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, saying that they should leave the country effective immediately. The termination notices are being sent by email to about 500,000 people who came to the country under the Humanitarian Parole Program, created by the Biden administration. They arrived with financial sponsors and were given 2-year permits to live and work in the U.S. Those permits have now been revoked. The department tells recipients to use a mobile app called CPB Home and says that they will receive travel assistance and $1,000 upon arriving back in their home country. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
America in the Morning for Monday, June 16th, 2025 is produced by Jeff McKay. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour,
world leaders converge on Canada. I'm Clayton Neville.
The U.S. Army gets its birthday parade.
You have made all Americans very proud.
I'm Rich Johnson.
Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University graduate student, will stay in immigration lockup for now. I'm Jennifer King.
A recap of the No Kings rallies. Historic rains in West Virginia leads to death. And a leading member of the Democrat National Committee announces she's leaving and why.
What's coming to the small screen for you to watch at home this summer? I'm Kevin Carr.
Is Father's Day starting to get a little more attention as a holiday? I'm Julie Walker.
Our program continues after these messages. America in the Morning continues. Summer-like temperatures will be felt across the nation. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
The heat is going to remain quite strong across the Southwest into Southern California, Utah, and Colorado, and this could also extend into parts of western Texas, northward through western Kansas, and southern Nebraska. These areas will have widespread 90s and 100s with many 110-degree readings and possibly breaking some records. In the Northwest, it'll be dry with some sunshine, and highs will hold mostly in the 70s and 80s. And then severe weather has continued to form over the Plain States through this past weekend, and today these heavier, gustier thunderstorms will be in the northern plains. This will start with some heavier rain through North and South Dakota to start the day, and then continue into Minnesota and western Wisconsin by this afternoon. This can produce localized flooding, hail, damaging winds, and even a tornado. This will continue into more of Wisconsin, southward to Iowa tonight. A second area of thunderstorms will develop in eastern Wyoming and then continue into Nebraska late today into tonight before shifting into northern Kansas late tonight. And there will also be some heavier thunderstorms across portions of southeast Missouri into western Tennessee and Kentucky, as well as eastern Arkansas and northern Mississippi. Then we'll have additional showers and thunderstorms forming through a good portion of the southeast and mid-Atlantic from Florida northward to Virginia and as far west as eastern Texas. And then some of these storms could provide some heavier rain. A little farther to the north from Maryland into southeast New York, it'll be fairly cloudy and cool today with occasional rain and drizzle. Highs will hold mostly in the 60s. And then for the rest of New York and New England and extending into the eastern Great Lakes, it will be brighter and warmer with highs in the 70s and 80s. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. to follow the podcast version of our program. With a war continuing in Ukraine and escalating battle getting worse between Israel and Iran in the Middle East, President Trump is joining other world leaders from the wealthiest countries in the Canadian Rockies this week for the G7 summit, hosted by Prime Minister Mark Carney in his first major international gathering. Correspondent Clayton Neville has a preview.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says that his priorities during the G7 summit being held west of Calgary include strengthening peace and security, also building critical mineral supply chains, and creating more jobs. Tariffs also a hot topic, and also the war between Russia and Ukraine and the current fighting between Israel and Iran. Before leaving for Canada, President Trump was asked if a peace deal between those countries can be reached.
I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens, but sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
Ahead of the summit, Canadian politician Charlie Angus bashed President Trump.
And this is the man who will soon be crossing our border to attend the G7 meetings in Canada.
He called the president a gangster.
I have received hundreds of messages of concern and outrage from Canadians that a convicted felon, sexual predator, and a man who has threatened our nation's sovereignty is being allowed into our country.
This is French President Emmanuel Macron visited Greenland before the summit to show European support for the Danish territory that President Trump has expressed interest in. Leaders from Italy, from Germany, Japan, and the UK also attending the summit. I'm Clayton Neville.
Weekend protests across the country were expected. None in the nation's capital as the United States Army celebrated its 250th anniversary with a parade that included tanks, helicopters, and troops that marched steps away from the White House. Correspondent Rich Johnson has a recap.
Fewer people than predicted showed up, but those who were near the reviewing stand cheered loudly for President Trump as he kicked off the celebration that featured about 6,600 soldiers marching along Constitution Avenue to celebrate the Army's 250th birthday.
Every other country celebrates their victories. It's about time America did too.
The president and top cabinet members watched as the Army chronicled its history, from the musket-bearing Minutemen to the drones and mine-searching robot dogs of today. And President Trump said every era has something in common.
Time and again, America's enemies have learned that if you threaten the American people, our soldiers are coming for you. Your defeat will be certain, your demise will be final, and your downfall will be total and complete.
One viral moment was video of a very squeaky tank, but few noted that it was a World War II-era Sherman tank. The Army had long planned to celebrate its 250th, and it coincided with President Trump's long desire to hold a full-scale military parade on his birthday, which was also June 14th. America has a history of celebrating military victories, including the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, the two World Wars, and the First Iraq War. There were no celebration at the ends of the Korean or Vietnam Wars. But Saturday's parade did include veterans who until now have not been formally honored, those from the Second Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan.
You make us strong, and tonight you have made all Americans very proud.
I'm Rich Johnson.
Not far from the Army's anniversary parade in Washington, D.C., and in cities large and small across the nation and around the world, there were an estimated 2,000 No Kings rallies that protested President Trump and his administration's policies. A follow-up from correspondent Haya Panjwani.
Tensions escalated on the streets of downtown Los Angeles as police tried to disperse demonstrators. Many of them seemed caught off guard by the abrupt order to leave. Police fired rubber bullets, canisters of tear gas, while protesters responded with Earlier in the day, Philadelphia protesters gathered for the flagship No Kings rally in Love Park. Here's Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II with Unite the Poor.
Our demonstration of moral strength is in opposition to the tyranny that threatens our very existence as a country. And this kind of gathering can unite us in a moral movement to save America. And we will not stand down, not now, not ever.
In Washington, D.C., demonstrators gathered in a march towards the White House.
Trump must go now! Trump must go now!
And in Mississippi, some countergroups congregated near the protest, including a small group of Christians with an anti-abortion sign preaching from the Bible. And in France, organizer Ada Shen.
Because of the symbolism of rising up and resisting tyranny.
The protests organized by the 50501 movement come on the heels of protests flaring up around the country over federal immigration enforcement raids that began last week.
American values are not the values of the plutocracy or the limited few rich people. American values are about what we are as a country all together. It's about inclusion. It's about working together. It's about checks and balances. And all of that, I'm afraid, of being eroded with the current administration.
Trump supporter Blake Bartlum disagreed with the premise of the protests.
I think that the notion that Trump's a king is ridiculous. They've been running with that narrative for the last 10 years, and he hasn't been a king once. If he was a king, he never would have left office in 2020.
I'm Haya Panjwani.
While the overwhelming majority of these rallies were peaceful, there was violence reported in Los Angeles. Police were forced to respond with tear gas after some in a large crowd began hurling rocks, bottles, and bricks at officers. Portland, Oregon, officers used tear gas after demonstrators tried to breach an immigration facility. A man drove his SUV into a crowd at a rally in Northern Virginia, injuring one person, and shots were fired, but nobody hurt at a march in Salt Lake City. Among the stories we're covering next, immigrants' personal health information revealed, and Facebook meets the future with artificial superintelligence. America in the Morning, back after these messages. The death toll has risen to 5, including a 3-year-old, when torrential rain fell in northern West Virginia. Parts of Wheeling and Ohio County, southwest of the Pennsylvania border, saw 4 inches of rain fall in just 30 minutes. The unexpected deluge overwhelmed local waterways and infrastructure and submerged vehicles in small towns east of the Ohio River. Authorities said vehicles were swept into swollen creeks. Some people sought safety in trees. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey said there are reports of up to 4 people still missing and that his state is working with FEMA for assistance. Shifting gears, federal authorities say they will continue to detain Columbia University graduate student Mahmoud Khalil. Correspondent Jennifer King has the update.
Federal authorities say Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University graduate student, will stay in immigration lockup for now. In a filing, the government said Khalil lied on his green card application, something he disputes. He was arrested in March, the first international student detained as part of President Trump's crackdown on demonstrations against the war in Gaza at U.S. college campuses. Khalil's lawyers say the government missed a Friday deadline to appeal a federal judge's ruling and that he should be released immediately. New Jersey U.S. District Judge Michael Farbiage sided with the government's interpretation, saying his preliminary injunction does not prevent the administration from keeping Khalil in detention in Louisiana. The ACLU released a video where celebrities like Tom Morello with Rage Against the Machine read a letter Khalil wrote from jail to his newborn son.
One day you might ask why people are punished for standing up for Palestine.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Khalil should be deported because of his alleged role in protests that create a hostile environment for Jewish students. The federal court clerk's office says the judge will respond to each side's arguments in a future filing. I'm Jennifer King.
Several states are upset with the Trump administration after reports surfaced that some immigrants' personal health information was shared with the Department of Homeland Security. Lisa Dwyer reports.
President Donald Trump's administration has provided deportation officials with personal data, including the immigration status on millions of Medicaid enrollees, a move that could make it easier to locate people as part of Trump's sweeping immigration crackdown. The administration says the data sharing will ensure that Medicaid benefits are reserved for individuals who are lawfully entitled to receive them. The data includes information of people living in California, Illinois, Washington State, and Washington, D.C., all of which allow non-U.S. citizens to enroll in Medicaid programs that pay for their expenses using only state taxpayer dollars. Critics say that the information could scuttle the hopes of migrants if they have ever obtained Medicaid benefits funded by the federal government. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
One of the best-known members of the Democrat National Committee is leaving. American Federation of Teachers President Randi Weingarten wrote to DNC Chair Ken Martin and said she has fundamental disagreements with him. Politico is reporting that Weingarten's departure is the latest sign that the party is still embroiled in factional disputes. In her letter to Martin, Weingarten said she, quote, appears to be out of step with the leadership you are forging, end quote. Weingarten also supported another candidate to lead the DNC, Wisconsin Democrat Party Chair Ben Wickler. The infighting among Democrats comes as they're trying to rebuild their party in the wake of the 2024 election loss. Facebook's parent company is focusing their efforts on what some are calling the next leap forward with artificial superintelligence. This will take some smarts, as we learn from tech reporter Chuck Palm.
Facebook and Instagram parent Meta Corporation has made a $14.3 billion investment in the artificial intelligence company Scale and promoted the CEO to their developing superintelligence team. The deal announced by Mark Zuckerberg reflected their AI efforts as they face tough competition from rivals such as Google and OpenAI. Scale announced they will remain an independent company, but the agreement will substantially expand Scale and Meta's commercial relationship. Meta is said to be holding a 49% stake in the startup. In what may be a slight battle for nomenclature, Zuckerberg is focusing on the abstract idea of superintelligence, while rival companies are calling the next version artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Meta's AI systems like Llama have been used as free open source products that allow developers to modify some of their key components. This is a unique approach to AI, but also seen as lagging behind their competitors like OpenAI and Google. For more tech news, find me at chuckpalm.com.
Baseball, NBA, and more in Monday Sports. Here's Robert Workman.
What an incredible finish to golf's U.S. Open at Oakmont. J.J. Spawn began the day one shot off the lead, but bogeyed 5 of the first 6 holes to fall off the pace. But the 34-year-old bounced back, birdieing 4 of the last 7 holes, including a 64-foot clincher on 18, good for a 2-stroke victory and his first major crown. Baseball, the Dodgers edged the Giants 5-4 last night, but both teams made bigger news off the field. Just before the contest, San Francisco acquired slugger Rafael Devers from the Red Sox for pitchers Jordan Hicks and Kyle Harrison, who had been scheduled to start the game, plus a couple of prospects. Then after the game, the Dodgers addressed the long-standing question of when Shohei Ohtani will return to the mound. The answer? Tonight. Ohtani will be the opener when LA hosts the Padres. The two-way star has not pitched in 21 months since his second Tommy John surgery. Red Sox, meantime, completed their sweep of the Yankees 2-0. Devers went deep in his last home game at Fenway Park. Brian Bayo and company with a 5-hitter. Rays shut out the Mets 9-0, a 5-hitter for Shane Baz and the Baslers. Manager Kevin Cash.
The slider probably stood out. I know he's been working on that pitch, or cutter, whatever you want to call it, and it played pretty big. It opened up some other avenues, not only that pitch, but made his curveball better, and probably they had to respect 4 pitches as opposed to 3.
Mariners blanked the Guardians 6-0 behind the 4-hit pitching of Emerson Hancock and Security Guarantee. J.P. Crawford with a grand slam. Orioles tattooed the Angels 11-2, hitting 3 homers, including a granny from Gary Sanchez. And the Phillies blew out the Blue Jays 11-4. Nick Castellanos with a 4-run 4-bagger. That's Monday Sports.
When we return on America in the Morning, Father's Day. It's no dad joke after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Plenty of movies are scheduled to be released this summer in a theater near you, but there are also some surprises to be found on streaming and TV. Kevin Carr has details.
With so many choices on television, from broadcast to cable to streaming, it's hard to plan what to watch this summer. Here are some of the hotter shows returning during the warm weather.
I do believe that Jesus is most likely the Messiah.
This past weekend saw the return of The Chosen, available Sunday nights on Prime Video.
If I'm gonna protect people, I gotta start thinking outside the box.
On June 24th, the Marvel Cinematic Universe continues on Disney Plus with the spin-off Ironheart.
It's hard and it's brutal, and that's what makes it special.
You can argue whether it's a comedy when The Bear Season 4 continues on Hulu on June 25th. And fans of the hit Korean series Squid Game are itching to watch Season 3 when it drops on Netflix on June 27th.
Is this a hit it situation?
It's whatever kind of adventure we want it to be.
The Starship Enterprise continues to go where no one has gone before when Season 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds hits Paramount Plus on July 17th.
Want to take a stab at being social? I do like stabbing.
August has a slate of shows coming, starting with Jenna Ortega as the title character in Wednesday Season 2, which drops on Netflix on August 8th.
I want what's on that ship.
We can do it.
The Xenomorphs come to our planet via FX and Hulu when Alien Earth debuts on August 12th.
You ready for the next adventure, pal?
And in spite of superhero fatigue, John Cena returns to HBO Max when Peacemaker Season 2 debuts on August 21st. I'm Kevin Carr.
Sunday was Father's Day, and while dads around the nation enjoyed their day to be recognized, as for comparing it with Mother's Day, old dad takes a back seat, especially on social media. Correspondent Julie Walker explains.
Is Father's Day starting to get a little more attention as a holiday? Not if you check social media. In an expletive-filled post on TikTok and X, rapper Plies talks about how Father's Day carries about as much clout as Groundhog Day, saying Sunday's commemoration might as well be removed from the calendar. But the spending disparity with Mother's Day may be narrowing. That's according to the National Retail Federation and Prosper Insights and Analytics. The organization's forecast that a record-breaking $24 billion will be spent on Father's Day this year, surpassing the previous mark of $22.9 billion in 2023. They say consumers plan to spend an average of just under $200 on their dads and father figures this year. I'm Julie Walker.
That's our show for today, Monday, June 16th, 2025. America in the Morning is produced by Jeff McKay. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.